Welcome back once more to the broadcast. Now, we have been talking about the amendments to the electoral laws that have been proposed and are being pushed largely by the Jubilee part or side of the National Assembly. We'll talk about NASA and their demands, their reducible minimum demands, and they say they will not be part of the election on the 26th of this month if their demands are not met. And so far, according to them, their demands have not been met at all. But before we do that, let's bring in another voice that has come to the discussion. That is the voice of the international community through the envoys here in the country. And they did speak about what's happening, the current political situation in Kenya. They did speak out this past week. Let's listen in.
Leaders on both sides must be reasonable in their demands on the IEBC and in their actions leading up to and following the new election. It would be impossible to remake the IEBC in a way that satisfies all political demands, and everyone should refrain from undermining it. All should give the IEBC space, time, and respect.
We have been talking to all parties about this, and as mentioned earlier, our feeling is that international best practice is not to change electoral laws so close to an election.
All right. And rather swiftly, some part of the political divide did also respond to that, and that is NASA. James Orengo, the senator for Siaya, did seek to react to what the envoys were saying that the demands being propagated by NASA are not blackmail.
Demonstrations will continue on Friday, as arranged, all over the country, and that will be in accordance with the Constitution again, the right to associate and the right to assemble, the right to picket, and the right to hold peaceful demonstration in accordance with the law. And we want to emphasize to the diplomatic community that this, whenever we hold demonstration, it is in strict compliance with a right under the Constitution, and is a right that we'll continue to enjoy without any coercion or blackmail for us to behave in a certain fashion or manner.
All right. Before we go to the NASA side and their issues, Dismas, what is your take on the advisories or pieces of advice for the Kenyan political class by the envoys and the reaction by NASA to that?
Well, in my understanding, the envoys, they're just like our religious leaders. They want to tiptoe around critical issues because they're diplomats and their statements are of a diplomatic nature. And if I were NASA, Jubilee, or IBC, I wouldn't pay attention. I would just treat the observations as observations. And what we're supposed to do as a nation is just go with our constitution and the relevant statutes. Because when the international diplomats are making a position, they are serving their selfish interest. And their selfish interest may not be consistent with Wanjiku's interest. And Wanjiku's interest today is not probably consistent with NASA or Jubilee. Because Wanjiku wants a free, fair, credible election where she'll go and cast a ballot on a particular day, go home and wait for results without any violence, without any destruction of property. But more important, she wants to be sure that her vote counts, not the person who is counting. That's the bottom line. And these international diplomats, you've seen them. I mean, they were here during the observation process, and they said everything was free, fair, credible, and they said Kenya should now break into a dance and song. When the Supreme Court made a judgment, they did a quick U-turn and said, wait a minute, we only said this election was free, fair, and credible only on the voting day. We did not talk about the results management. And any Kenyan, anybody from NASA, Jubilee, or IBC who takes the diplomat's word to the bank would be very naive. I wouldn't place a premium on their words.
All right. Mheshimiwa Barasa, from a Jubilee standpoint, how would you describe the warnings and advice by the diplomatic community?
I think I want to agree with my good friend Dismas, what he has just said. And as a person, I would want to give them a free sent advice. That as a diplomat, you don't wake up one morning and you go on national television, then you want to address the country. They have the diplomatic channels of either even sitting with the government, sitting even with the Jubilee, sitting with NASA. I think in terms of advising this country on the matter at hand, the church has done it better. Because the church has tried to engage both NASA and the Jubilee on a round table to try to understand the points that they are trying to put across, and with a view of getting a common ground for them so that we can have a free and fair elections. So for the diplomats, I think they should not waste our time advising us what they think should be done in Kenya. Kenya's democracy is really different from the democracy of the countries they are coming from. What they need to do, they should sit down with the political players, NASA and Jubilee, to try to understand before providing a minimum of ground that should be followed.
Mheshimiwa, do you agree with that? Given the fact that they have even issued or threatened to, revoke the travel documents, visas of the politicians.
I think the diplomatic community should give us a break. I want to agree on that point with my colleagues. Immediately after the Supreme Court pronounced itself on the election petition, I paid a courtesy call in the company of a few of my colleagues to the Ambassador Robert Godek, the U.S. ambassador. And one of the questions we put to him and asked him, why is it that the international community appearing to be taking sides on this particular issue? Because I was at Bomas just before the results were announced. We were there with my colleagues from the NASA side, and we were accompanying our party leader there. And he went into a session with the diplomatic community and told them, please prevail on the IEBC not to announce the results until all the requisite documents are actually in-house. So we asked actually Ambassador Godek, we asked him, when you were at Bomas, our presidential candidate asked you to prevail upon IEBC. And what he told us, that no, we couldn't prevail on IEBC not to announce the results because NASA did not provide us with any evidence to show that announcing such results would, yet they were told, we don't have all the forms. So immediately when we were going, the Supreme Court had just made the ruling on the petition. And it took a different turn, and they was now saying, based on this, for us, because we saw the process during the day was okay. So really, they're trying to play ping pong. You will remember that these people are protecting their interest. The American ambassador would remember that the Americans just benefit from a $300 billion project to do all the road to Mombasa. So they are really trying to protect the status quo, in my view, so that they are basically trying to protect their interests. So they should really give us a break. What we are doing in demonstrating and demanding, demanding for a fair playing ground is in our right, and I agree with Senator Orengo, who says that is enshrined in the Constitution. I wanted to just mention something in passing, and to my friend Kavemba, who earlier on had talked about that this thing cannot be bipartisan because NASA is in the House. Bipartisan means both parties agree, is not that members are in the House. That is not bipartisan. Bipartisan on sensitive issues, what my friend Mokua was talking about, is whereby both parties sit together, actually outside Parliament before it goes, and say, okay, we want to propose this. Get us a number of people, get a number of people in equal number, and bring them together. But when we're in Parliament, we agree. The Jubilee guys have more numbers than ours as of now, until after 6 months when these election petitions have actually happened. So what I was trying to tell him, but a bipartisan approach is whereby both parties agree to sponsor members to sit and agree on something that is there. So when it goes to the House, there is very limited debate, and there is no, even today, we'll meet with him after we are from the recess on the floor of the House. But when you go into that House, with the numbers that Jubilee have, they have actually stopped reasoning. It is, as the President said, this is okay, let's go on with it, without even reading through the merits and the demerits. And this is what is going to come and bite them at the right time.
Bipartisanship. That one to happen, both parties have to be willing. Clearly, there is a party that is not willing. And the good thing is that Mheshimiwa is a bit honest, that what they are avoiding is the process where Jubilee have numbers. Yet we are just coming out of a competitive election, which is to determine who will have the numbers and who will not have the numbers. And you have a right to enjoy those numbers for as long as you're not doing anything unconstitutional. So why is it that NASA is out to frustrate Jubilee from passing its legislative agenda just because they have the numbers.
Right.
The numbers were not, it was not like they just came from nowhere. It was through an electoral process, and that is what the Constitution provides for. So you see, he's pushing for an approach where both Jubilee and NASA have equal numbers. Yet the reality of the matter is that Jubilee has the majority.
Before you give us your thoughts on the diplomatic community, this must have something to say to that.
I just wanted to add something what my friend has said. We are both, him and myself, this is our first time to be in National Assembly. But in terms of experience, I'm more experienced because I've been attending him, he has been boycotting. So I've gone through some various standing orders and I fully understand. So Parliament functions on the majority vote. So there is no way that you are going to have an annex of Parliament elsewhere. Exactly. Parliament will continue to carry out its legislative duties, and there is nothing. It isn't an illegality to have the majority. That's why we have the majority party in the House and we have the minority.
But Ben, it's important to have a historic perspective.
Yes.
That you had the Windsor Committee chaired by Senator Orengo and Governor Kiraitu Murungi now. Yeah, I mean, then he was a senator, but now he's a governor. And there are two committees, or rather two teams, sat down and agreed on these sensitive pieces of legislation. And when it went to the National Assembly, they were told, don't play with commerce, don't do anything. Now, when you're handling a hot potato, that's what you do. And you remember what Mishuki said about trying to balance a lever using one hand. That's the situation where we are in. We need these two hands. You need a Jubilee hand, and you need a NASA hand, so that you have this legislation. And good legislation is not always about numbers. It's about the content. That when you're coming with this legislation, does it reflect the cumulative interest and aspirations of the entire nation?
All right, thank you.
So that even the minority must have a say.
It is because of that last point that we are urging NASA members to go to Parliament so that they can give us those views, so that probably Jubilee people are sensible. They can probably see some sense in some of the points that they'll be bringing, because you cannot force them on the table. That is just the point. It is very important for us to be clear that nobody, actually the position is that they've been invited. They continue to be invited. It is for their own reasons that they are keeping away. Why would it be very unfair to accuse Jubilee of locking them out, yet Jubilee is publicly and openly continuously inviting them to be part of the sessions.
Let me just put my final submissions on this issue, and just for the record of my colleague who purports to be more experienced now. We are not saying that the things that are happening on the floor of the House are illegal. In fact, they are not. And it is not illegal for any side of the political divide to have a majority in a House. I mean, there must be a majority and there must be a minority under the current Constitution. We are talking about whereby you have critical issues that affect the country, like these particular laws that have actually been brought. It is okay, it will be passed by the numbers in Parliament, and it will be legitimate, and any piece of legislation that is actually passed by a majority members in Parliament will be law. But we are saying, in the spirit of the country as it is, this is a recipe for dividing this country. I can tell you for sure. Having numbers in Parliament is not good enough.
I have a question for you, Mheshimiwa, before you continue.
Yeah.
Why haven't you, as NASA lawmakers, gone to Parliament to take on the Jubilee MPs and reason with them and make them see your point of view?
If my friend was in Parliament on the day that when they shortened the days on day one, when we read mischief on this issue, is when the bill was presented on the floor of the House. They moved to reduce the number of days for publication from 14 to 1. And we raised our issues. We say this thing, we don't, there's no hurry, there's no crisis in us trying to bring this bill. But because they said, they kept on shouting, we have our numbers and are going to push this thing through. And I want to tell them, and this is on record on national TV today, that today they will just stamp about the numbers that they actually do have in Parliament. But on this particular issue of the bill, on these coming elections, it will not pass. In the next few weeks or so, you will see people sitting down and very humbled at that, the people who are shouting at the top of their voices. And my friend here who says that he's now more experienced than my colleagues here, including myself, who will be at the back. And people will sit down and people will begin to reason. This country is much bigger than a majority.
Are you confirming there'll be talks for coalition government?
We are not looking for a coalition government. There will be no talks for a coalition government. There will be talks about how to take this country forward.
All right.
There will be talks about how to go into an election that is free, fair, and credible. And let me tell you, just hold on. And let me tell you, part of the options
from this issue,
part of the options that are also open to all of us, and constitutionally so, is that you know, I keep on saying where I come from, they talk about even children are born and they die. In my dialect, that's what they mean is, if this country is become too small for all of us, options of secession are also on the table.
You see, those are the defeatist arguments that we want to do away with.
There is something that I want to remind my friend.
Yes.
He has talked over NASA and the Jubilee getting their team to sit together. We have that avenue option in Parliament when we were constituting the ad hoc legal committee to look into these matters. And as to when it comes to the representation from both sides, the minority and the majority party, it's clear. They have not provided the names. So are we going again to go to court for them to bring the names? That we want to put up a committee to look into these amendments, these elections laws.
Okay.
They haven't provided the names.
All right, thank you. That is a discussion that is not going to end anytime soon. I suspect we shall be having this conversation for the next 5 years. But let's talk about, in the next 10 minutes or so, let's talk about NASA. What pundits are saying is that NASA did cancel some meetings, some rallies at the coast in the last minute. And sources say that indicate that Raila Odinga, the NASA presidential candidate, is scheduling or is planning, to travel out of the country, in the coming week. And this, according to them, means that NASA is not committed to the October 26th, repeat presidential election. Mutinda, let me start with you. What does that mean if NASA boycotts? Kenyans, you say that Kenyans get scared when they hear that, but what does it mean? What are the options that the country has if NASA do not want to be part of the election?
I would really be more comfortable if they were using the word you've used, boycott. Unfortunately, that is not what they are saying. They are saying there will be no election. And if there is a statement that should be interrogated by all well-meaning Kenyans, it is that statement. There is no statement that is leaving Kenyans with suspense more than the statement, there will be no election. Boycotting is their right. Like I've said, and like so many other people have correctly said, there is no law in Kenya that makes voting compulsory. So if they boycott, it will be an attempt, to deny the winner of the particular, the election, the legitimacy, which in their opinion is going to help them probably to force some negotiation that will bring some coalition government. I cannot see it in any other way. And action speaks louder than words. You can look at the two teams and how they've been acting since the Supreme Court ruling. Which of the two teams seem like it is set for the election and which of the teams it seems not to be set? So the boycott would be their right. And if they say that, it's just like in football. If you go for the pitch and you had a game and one team doesn't show up, of course you know what happens. The team that shows up is given the points. So that is what will happen. But the problem is that what is in the interest of the country.
Okay.
And is it an honest approach? Because the thing is this, in 2010, Mheshimiwa has even talked about something else that they are also trying to use to threaten us. Secession, breaking away the country. And that's why I've said that is very, of Kenya, then we remain, that is very defeatist. What happens, for instance, because the problem is, to that People's Republic of Kenya, when now they go there and someone also decides to dominate, will they now again break further? Because the thing is, as a country, we went for a referendum. We set rules in 2010, the Constitution. If there are people who feel that those rules, the way they are, will disadvantage them going forward, then let them be honest and candid enough to bring a discussion into the rules, but not threaten the rest of Kenyans with secession.
All right.
So what I'm saying is, it is important for Mheshimiwa to come out clearly, and the other NASA leaders, to tell us exactly what it is they have in mind when they are threatening that there will be no election on the 26th. Because once the IEBC, the body that is constitutionally mandated to conduct elections and to even give us date, has said that it is on the 26th. Who is this Kenyan who's got a right to try and cast doubt on that? And they're not even very clear about exactly what it is they will do.
Let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
That's what I'm saying. I think it would be important. And it would be important to have all leaders who are coming out to say that, to explain to us what exactly is it that they will do to ensure that there is no election.
All right.
Yes.
Let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
I was up country about a week ago, and I met my chiefs as part of routine meetings I have in the constituency. And I noticed that they call them now the sub-county, the DC as it may, the sub-county administrator, had actually compelled all my chiefs to give him 4 names per polling center, that apparently they were sending them to Jubilee, and the names were actually provided, which I confirmed, and I have the list of the names. And I asked them, why is the provincial administration trying to compel you people to provide names of people who are participating in an electoral process, yet you're supposed to be non-partisan? And they told me they were being threatened. These are some of the indicators of a falling government. Now, let me tell you something. When we talk about these elections that are coming, back to Kavemba's point, NASA is out of government. NASA has every intention to join government. The sooner we can join government, the better for all of us. I can tell you that. If it can happen tomorrow, we will go into it. Now, we are saying we are not going to boycott elections because we want to be in government. And the only process to be in government is by participating through an election. So I want us to be very clear up to that point.
Can you come back to my question?
So we are saying...
What does it mean?
What it means is this. Elections, as envisaged in the Constitution, will not happen in this country if the rules are not fair to both parties. So and we are not saying we are not boycotting.
What will happen?
There will be no elections. Simple. There will be no elections.
So what does that mean?
That there will be no elections. That there will be no elections.
So what happens to other Kenyans like us who are looking forward to that election?
I think
the Constitution is very clear that we need to elect our leaders.
Let's have one conversation. There are Kenyans who want to be part of an election.
Exactly.
So are you saying that you will disrupt the other Kenyans?
I am not saying that we're going to disrupt. We are saying there will be no elections if the rules are not fair and credible. And what are elections? We need to ask ourselves, what is an election? Just a moment. What is an election as envisaged in the Constitution? That should be the biggest question.
All right.
Yeah, and we're saying that election is not going to be there
when the rules
if the rules are not fair.
Who determines that? That is why we went to court. No. The protagonists are not the ones. That's why we have independent institutions.
All right.
The judiciary...
Mheshimiwa Barasa.
I want to be clear on this matter.
Yes.
That the only institution that has the power either to call off these elections is the IEBC and maybe the court.
All right.
If somebody goes to court and then the court also suspends the election. The NASA presidential candidate's name will be on the ballot until maybe if he writes to them that they're not willing to participate in this election. That is the only avenue that they can use so that they cannot go to participate in the elections. But as long as the name of Raila Odinga is on the ballot paper and the polling centers are opened and the Kenyans go to vote, even if there will be 10 people turning out to vote in a particular polling center in Nyanza or anywhere in this country, it will be an election. But if they will write to IEBC that they are not willing to participate in these elections, they have withdrawn for one reason or the other, then of course Uhuru Kenyatta will be sworn in.
All right, let's have the final say,
and the
final thoughts on this from Dismas. Dismas, what do you predict happening?
Well, one is unable to understand exactly what NASA means when they say there shall be no election, and how they're going to effect I don't know whether it's a threat or it's a directive or it's a position. But assuming that on 26th we don't have that election, then 2 scenarios emerging. And you have lawyers giving you different views. The Jubilee lawyers say that if you don't have an election on 26th, President Kenyatta remains in office till he hands over to another person, or there's an election and he wins, so he retains office. That's the Jubilee position. Well, the NASA position is that on the 26th, the presidency of President Kenyatta comes to an abrupt end, and then at that case, we have a caretaker administration by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Muturi. And when you look at those 2 scenarios, none works in the interest of Wanjiku. So at the end of the day, one sees a situation whereby you have to go back to the Supreme Court again to give directions.
All right.
But the big question, Ben, is why as a nation do we want to open a Pandora's box, or do we want to start swimming in funny waters, yet we have a constitution today which is very clear on how we are supposed to run an election? And the Supreme Court has indicated in black and white that the constitution is supposed to be held, or rather the election, it must be held in a manner consistent with the constitution and all the laws. Why is it that as a nation, we've got IBC, we've got NASA, we've got Jubilee? Does it mean that there's nobody in Kenya who wants to support that position, that we need to have a free, fair, credible election? Why do we want to invite a Pandora's box, and then poor Wanjiku is left in the streets not knowing where we are supposed to be going?
All right. Thank you. Pertinent questions, pertinent issues that Kenyans will be thinking about. 2 weeks, 3 days, 17 days to the October 26th repeat presidential election. Let's take another quick break. When we return, we will speak about the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and where they find themselves in between the two sides of the political divide. The commission itself, with its seeming divisions among the commissioners of the IEBC. But first, let's bring you Siasa Files. This week, it is retired President Mwai Kibaki.